The night the city lights dimmed through the rain-streaked window of his office, James sat alone, staring at the empty screen in front of him. Just a few months ago, he was a man everyone admired, a young, confident CEO with million-dollar projects and a future so bright it seemed untouchable. But now, every contract had been canceled, every investor had turned their back, and every door that once opened for him was now slammed shut. He could still hear the echo of his father's voice earlier that day, sharp, disappointed, final. "You've failed this family, James. We trusted you, and you ruined everything." Those words pierced deeper than any financial loss. He had not only lost his company, he had lost the man he once called his greatest supporter. As he walked out of the towering building that used to bear his name, the rain began to pour harder, washing away the remnants of his pride. People passed by, umbrellas open, faces indifferent. No one cared that the man walking in the storm was once worth millions. At home, Tu Diep waited in silence. The lights were low, the room small, a world far away from the glass offices and luxury dinners James once knew. When she saw him enter, drenched and broken, she didn't say a word. She simply walked to him, wrapped a towel around his shoulders, and whispered, "You still have me, James. That hasn't changed." Her words were soft, but they struck deep into his weary heart. In that moment, something inside him cracked open, not from defeat, but from realization. For the first time in his life, he saw love not as a luxury, but as a lifeline. He looked at her, the woman who had stood by him when the world called him a failure. She wasn't dressed in expensive clothes. Her hands were rough from long hours of work, yet her eyes carried the kind of strength no wealth could buy. That night, as the rain continued to fall, James finally allowed himself to cry. And when he did, Tu Diep held him close, whispering that storms don't last forever. They only wash away what no longer belongs. In that fragile silence, he understood. All the million-dollar doors had closed because life was about to open another one that didn't need gold handles or glass walls, only love strong enough to build a new beginning. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, brushing gently against James's tired face. The sound of birds outside replaced the usual noise of car horns and city chatter. It was strange, almost peaceful, yet heavy with the weight of uncertainty. Tu Diep had already woken up. She was standing in the small kitchen, boiling water, her hands moving with quiet rhythm. The smell of warm porridge filled the room. James sat silently at the wooden table, watching her. Her movements were so ordinary, yet in that simplicity, there was something extraordinary, a sense of calm strength he had never truly noticed before. "Eat something," she said softly, placing a bowl in front of him. "You can't rebuild on an empty stomach." James let out a faint smile. "Rebuild?" he echoed, his voice low, almost trembling. "Tu Diep, everything I've built is gone. The company, the reputation, my father's trust, all gone. I don't even know where to start." Tu Diep sat down across from him, her eyes steady. "Then we start small," she said. "A seed doesn't become a tree in one day. You once built an empire, James. This time, we'll build a life, one that no one can take away." Her words wrapped around his heart like sunlight after a storm. For the first time in weeks, James felt something other than despair, hope, fragile but alive. Later that day, they packed what little they had into an old pickup truck and drove out of the city. The skyline faded behind them, replaced by endless green fields, the air fresher, the sky wider. Tu Diep pointed toward a small plot of land by the river. "We can rent this," she said. "The soil is good. You always said business is about growth, didn't you? So let's grow something real." James looked at her, surprised. "You mean farming?" She nodded with a laugh. "Why not? The world took your title, not your hands. Let's see what they can do." And so it began, not with contracts or capital, but with 2 pairs of hands, muddy shoes, and an unshakable belief in each other. The first few days were hard. The sun was harsh, the tools were heavy, and the profits non-existent. James, once a man of meetings and suits, now spent his mornings digging and watering plants, his back aching, his palms blistered. For the first time in his life, He wasn't chasing success. He was creating it with her. Weeks turned into months, and life in the countryside began to find its rhythm. The once rough hands of James had learned how to feel the soil, its moisture, its texture, its hidden life. Every morning, he rose with the sun, side by side with Tu Diep, working in quiet harmony. Their little field was no longer just land. It had become a living symbol of their resilience. By the time the first harvest came, the air was filled with the scent of ripened vegetables and hope. Tu Diep laughed as she held up a basket of freshly picked cucumbers. "Look at this, James. We did it." James wiped sweat from his brow, looking at her with pride. "No, you did it. Diep, you believed when I didn't." They sold their produce at the village market, and people began to notice the quality: fresh, organic, full of care. Word spread quickly. Within months, the small farm grew into a local success. James started developing plans to expand, sketching designs for greenhouses and sustainable irrigation systems. It was not the multi-million-dollar empire he once ruled, but it was his, born from struggle and love. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in golden hues, a sleek black car pulled up to the small farmhouse. James froze when he saw the familiar figure step out, his father. The old man, dignified but weary, looked at his son with a mix of pride and regret. "James," he began, his voice softer than James remembered, "I've heard what you and Diep built here. The city needs people like you, honest, grounded. I was wrong to let you go." Tu Diep stood quietly beside James, her hand slipping into his. The gesture was small, but it steadied him. "Father," James said after a pause, "I'm not the same man who begged to stay in your company. I failed because I was chasing numbers, not purpose. But here, I've found what truly matters." His father's eyes softened. "Then perhaps you can bring that purpose back to the company. We need new leadership, someone who understands both people and profit. Will you consider returning?" James was silent. He looked at Tu Diep, her face glowing in the fading light. This life they built together was humble but pure. Returning to the corporate world meant risking it, the peace, the simplicity, the love that had saved him. Tu Diep smiled gently. "James," she said softly, "maybe it's time. You don't have to choose between what we have and what you dream of. If we built a farm together, we can build a future too. Just promise me you won't lose yourself again." James took her hand and nodded. "I promise." That night, as they sat under the stars, their fingers intertwined, James realized something profound. Success no longer scared him, because this time, he had love as his foundation. The million-dollar doors that once closed had led him here, to the right door, the one that opened not to wealth, but to wisdom. The day James stepped back into the city, everything felt different. The tall glass buildings that once made him feel powerful now seemed cold and distant. He wasn't returning as the same CEO, who had worn designer suits and spoken in boardrooms about profit margins. He was coming back as a man who had learned to build from dirt, sweat, and love. When he entered the company's lobby, employees turned their heads in surprise. Some whispered, some smiled faintly. To them, James had once been a fallen prince, someone who had lost everything. But the quiet confidence in his eyes told a new story, of someone who had found himself again. Tu Diep stood beside him, her simple dress a stark contrast to the polished surroundings. Yet somehow, she looked more graceful than anyone in the room. Her presence was calm, grounding, a silent reminder of why he was there. In the boardroom, James's father introduced him to the executives. "This is my son, James," he said with a tone of pride he hadn't used in years. "He will lead our new agricultural division, focusing on sustainable farming and organic supply chains." Some board members exchanged doubtful glances. One whispered, "Wasn't he the one who ruined the last project?" Another chuckled softly, "What can a man from the countryside teach us about business?" James heard them, but he didn't flinch. He smiled and began to speak. "I understand what failure feels like," he said calmly. "I understand what it means to lose everything you thought defined you. But I also know what it takes to build again, not from capital, but from conviction. The world is changing, and if we don't change with it, all the money in these walls won't save us." His words cut through the silence. Even his father looked at him differently, not as a son to be corrected, but as a man who had earned his voice. After the meeting, Tu Diep found James standing by the window, looking over the city. "You did great," she said softly. He turned to her with a gentle smile. "You know, Diep, I used to think success meant owning skyscrapers. But now I realize real success is being brave enough to start again, even after losing everything." She laughed lightly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "And you're the bravest man I know." He looked at her, the woman who had stayed when everyone left, who had believed in him when he doubted himself. Months later, their company's sustainable farming project became a national success. It not only revived the brand's reputation, but also created jobs for hundreds of families. Across rural areas, James and Tu Diep often traveled back to the village where it all began, standing in the fields that once witnessed their struggle. One afternoon, as they watched little Nee, now happily running among the crops, James whispered, "You see, Diep, when all the million-dollar doors closed, love opened the right one." Tu Diep smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "And that door," she said softly, "will never close again." They stood there, hand in hand, watching the sun sink behind the golden fields, a symbol not of endings, but of endless beginnings, because sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with empires, but those who find love when the world turns its back. Life has a way of testing the strength of our hearts more than the sharpness of our minds. For James, everything he once believed to be the foundation of his life, wealth, success, and family legacy crumbled in front of him when he was fired from his father's company. When his reputation was dragged through whispers and judgment, it would have been easy to give up. But what made James truly extraordinary was not his business acumen, nor his education abroad. It was his ability to start over with nothing but the love of one woman and the faith that even from brokenness, something beautiful could rise. Tu Diep became his anchor, his reminder that love, when pure and patient, is the most powerful currency in the world. She didn't love him for what he had. She loved him for who he was when he had nothing left. Together, they learned that the world doesn't always reward goodness immediately, and that sometimes the most valuable doors, the ones worth walking through, only open when all the glamorous, golden ones have closed. Through their journey, we learn that failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of it. James had to lose his million-dollar empire to discover a new kind of wealth, peace, compassion, and purpose when he and Tu Diep began their small agricultural business. They were not just growing crops, they were cultivating resilience, honesty, and community. Their fields were filled not just with produce, but with proof that love and hard work can transform even the harshest soil into something fruitful. Tu Diep taught us that standing beside someone in their darkest hour is the truest expression of love. She never asked James to be the man he used to be. She simply believed in the man he was becoming. Her unwavering support reflected a lesson that many forget in a world chasing material success. You don't need diamonds to prove devotion or luxury to measure worth. Sometimes, all you need is to hold someone's hand through the storm and remind them they're not alone. And James, in return, showed that courage isn't about never falling, it's about standing up again. Even when the world laughs at your scars, he faced mockery, doubt, and rejection. Yet every time he looked at Tu Diep and little Nee, he remembered why he couldn't give up. His success in rebuilding his life was not just financial, it was emotional and moral. He had found meaning far deeper than profit margins or business deals. The story of James and Tu Diep reminds us that love is not about perfection, but persistence. It doesn't erase pain, but it gives pain a purpose. It turns losses into lessons and failures into foundations. Even when every million-dollar door slams shut, love quietly builds its own doorway, one that leads not to fame or fortune, but to fulfillment. In the end, we realize that the richest people are not those who have everything, but those who have someone who believes in them when they have nothing. True love, like the path James and Tu Diep walked together, doesn't sparkle under chandeliers, it grows under the rain, blooms in the mud, and shines brightest in the dark. So when life closes its golden gates on you, don't despair. Maybe it's only guiding you toward the door that truly matters, the one love is waiting to open.